The hum of my laptop filled the quiet apartment, mingling with the faint drizzle tapping against the window. I adjusted my silk blouse, feeling the smooth fabric cling to my arms as I scrolled through emails, meticulously ignoring the familiar pang of irritation. That familiar pang arrived again. My phone buzzed insistently. A message from my brother, Jake, popped up. "Hey, just used your drawing tablet. Hope that's okay." My chest tightened. My tablet, my private canvas, my hours of midnight sketches, the only place where I poured every secret fear and triumph, used without a word. I could practically hear the smug smile of his husband, Aaron, on the other end. I pinched the bridge of my nose, letting out a slow breath. I'd learned long ago to keep calm, to measure every reaction. But there was a heat bubbling beneath my composed exterior, a mix of frustration and hurt I couldn't ignore. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, an independent woman, quietly building a life they'd never fully understood, and yet boundaries still needed to be enforced, even with family. I stood, walking to the window, letting the rain blur the city lights. My fingers traced the edge of the tablet case, leaning against my desk. I could confront him now, or I could let him underestimate me, just like everyone else had once. Something told me this time I wouldn't just let it slide. I remember the first time I felt invisible in my own family's home. I was 19, freshly moved back from college, eager to show my parents the sketches I'd been pouring myself into for months. My hands trembled as I held the pad, my favorite pencil tucked behind my ear, heart racing with anticipation. "Madison, can we talk?" Mom's voice was clipped, her tone carrying that familiar edge. I walked into the living room and found her talking to Jake and Aaron, their laughter light, dismissive. I wanted to show you something," I started, my voice barely above a whisper. I flipped open my sketchbook, revealing page after page of detailed drawings, faces, cityscapes, designs I'd spent nights perfecting. Mom's brow furrowed. "You know, Madison, maybe you should focus on something more practical. Art doesn't pay the bills." The words landed like a slap. My throat tightened and my hands shook. I wanted to scream, to defend every line, every shadow, every tiny detail I'd perfected. But instead, I swallowed hard and held back tears. Jake looked away, pretending not to notice, and Aaron just smirked, leaning against the doorframe like he had all the answers. Later that night, I curled up in the corner of my tiny bedroom, the pencil slipping from my fingers. That's when Grandma's voice echoed in my mind, her gentle, unwavering wisdom. "Never let someone else decide the value of your dreams, Madison. Protect them like they're your own life, because in many ways they are." Her words became my anchor. I knew then that leaving wouldn't be easy, that forging my own path would mean stepping away from those who didn't see my worth. But something inside me hardened with resolve. I packed my favorite supplies into a worn backpack, kissed my pillow like a promise to myself, and whispered into the dark, "I'm going to prove them wrong." That night, I made a pact with myself. My talent would not be ignored, stolen, or dismissed again. I would build my world on my terms, and no one, not even family, would dictate its limits. I didn't look back. The first few months after leaving home were brutal, a blur of cramped apartments, odd jobs, and endless self-doubt. Every night, I'd spread my sketchbooks across the kitchen table, the smell of cheap coffee mixing with graphite dust, and force myself to draw. Sometimes my hands ached so badly I wanted to give up, but Grandma's words echoed. "Protect your dreams." One rainy evening, while sketching in a small downtown cafe, I met Lena, a seasoned illustrator who noticed my work. She had a sharp eye and an infectious energy, the kind that made you believe in possibilities. "You've got something," she said, examining my pad. "But talent alone won't carry you. You need strategy, grit, and patience." Under her guidance, I started building a freelance portfolio, working late into the nights, experimenting with techniques, and learning to navigate clients who doubted my age, my gender, or my ambition. The first big win felt almost unreal. A local gallery commissioned me for an art series. I remember gripping the contract, my fingers trembling, a mix of fear and exhilaration coursing through me. Slowly, my world expanded. I bought my first high-quality tablet, upgraded my brushes, and started designing under my own brand name. The first profitable sale came unexpectedly, an online client purchasing a custom digital piece. I celebrated quietly, alone, knowing that my family had no idea how far I'd come. Even as my career grew, I kept my life hidden. Social media posts were careful, modest glimpses of my work, never the full picture. It wasn't about secrecy for secrecy's sake, it was protection. I didn't want their judgment or interference, especially from Jake or Aaron, who had dismissed me once. I discovered a rhythm, mornings filled with sketching, afternoons with client calls, evenings walking through city streets, letting the neon lights inspire my compositions. Every small win, each client's praise, each artwork sold, was a brick in the fortress I was building for myself. By the time I was 24, I had a studio that reflected me, vibrant, meticulous, and unapologetically mine. Expensive canvases lined the walls, a sleek desk held my tablet and tools, and small personal touches, handwritten notes, framed sketches, reminded me of the girl who had once been overlooked. I had become invisible to them, yes, but powerful in ways they could never anticipate. And all the while, Aaron's careless assumption that he could use my equipment without asking lingered in the back of my mind, like a challenge. One day, I knew I'd have my moment. But until then, I built, I refined, and I waited. Patience, I realized, was the truest form of power. The doorbell rang at precisely 6:30 p.m., echoing through my spacious studio. I straightened my blouse, smoothed the hem of my skirt, and took a deep breath. The polished wooden floors reflected the soft glow of pendant lights, highlighting canvases of cityscapes and abstract portraits I'd spent years perfecting. Every detail, my meticulously arranged brushes, the gleaming tablet, the shelves lined with completed commissions, was a testament to late nights and relentless determination. Jake and Aaron stepped inside, casually assuming they were entering the apartment of the same younger, struggling Madison they had once dismissed. Aaron's confident grin faltered when his eyes roamed the studio, taking in the floor-to-ceiling art, the elegant desk setup, and the subtle hum of expensive equipment humming under my control. "Wow," Jake muttered, stepping cautiously. "This is—" I held up a hand, letting the silence hang. Aaron shifted uncomfortably, glancing at my tablet, then at the sketches pinned meticulously on the walls. I could see the recognition slowly dawning, the realization that this wasn't a hobby. This was my life, my empire in miniature, and they had never seen the full scope. I walked past them, trailing a finger across one of the larger canvases. "This," I said softly, "is what I've been building while everyone assumed I couldn't." My voice was calm, controlled, but it carried a weight they hadn't anticipated. Every late night, every client I convinced, every risk I took, it all led here. Aaron swallowed hard. "And Madison." "I didn't." "You used my equipment without asking," I interrupted, my tone even but sharp. "You assumed because I kept quiet, I would let you take what was mine. But that's not how this works." Jake looked at me, eyes wide, suddenly aware of every time he had dismissed my talent, every careless comment that had cut deeper than he realized. We didn't know." I let a small smile form, not of cruelty, but of triumph. "Now you do. This is my studio, my brand, my livelihood. And Aaron," I said, turning to him directly, "if you ever touch my tools again without permission, there will be consequences." Their reactions were a mix of shock, guilt, and awe. Aaron's usual smirk had vanished, replaced by a quiet, uneasy respect. Jake's face flushed with shame, yet relief softened it. He finally saw me as I had always been, capable, formidable, unshakable. I guided them toward the main workspace, letting them absorb every detail. The tablet displaying my latest digital series, sketches lined up with precision, awards subtly placed on the shelves. "This is what hard work looks like," I said. "And no one gets to claim a part of it unless I allow it." For a moment, The room was heavy with silence, the only sound my soft footsteps and the faint hum of equipment. And then, finally, Aaron nodded, a reluctant respect settling in his eyes. I get it, Madison. I really do. I let them linger in that realization, knowing the full weight of my success had finally landed. They came expecting a familiar, underestimated Madison. Instead, they found someone who had turned every slight, every doubt, and every stolen moment into fuel. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The look in their eyes was proof enough. The room still carried the weight of realization. Jake fidgeted near the window, Aaron standing stiffly by the desk, both processing that the girl they had underestimated was the one calling the shots now. I leaned against my drafting table, crossing my arms, letting the silence settle like a tangible force. I'm going to be very clear, I began, voice steady, calm, but commanding. This studio, these tools, everything I've built is mine. That includes respect, boundaries, and acknowledgement of effort. If you want to be part of my life, present or future, you follow the rules. Aaron's jaw tightened. Rules. Yes, I said, letting my tone leave no room for debate. First, no one uses my equipment without asking. Ever. Second, honesty matters. Jake, that means no more brushing me off, no more assuming I can't handle something because I'm the little sister. And you, Aaron, if you're going to be involved in my world, you respect my space and my choices, not the other way around. I paused, letting my words sink in, my gaze softening slightly as I added the third condition. Finally, all of you, pursue your own growth. Stop relying on others to make you feel important. Chase your goals, work on your flaws, and leave behind the patterns that kept me fighting for recognition in the first place. Jake swallowed, nodding slowly. I get it, Madison. I really do. Aaron's eyes met mine, a mixture of shame and reluctant respect. I see that now. I really do. I won't take your things again. I promise. I let out a small breath, not from relief, but from satisfaction. For the first time, they weren't just reacting, they were listening. I wasn't asking for apologies. I wasn't seeking validation. This was about accountability, about reshaping the dynamics that had allowed disrespect to thrive for years. I'm giving you a chance to do better, I said, letting a hint of warmth enter my tone. I care about you, but I will not allow old patterns to continue. If you want to be part of my life, show me that you've changed. If not, you'll respect my boundaries, and that's final. I watched as the words settled over them. The air between us was charged, not with anger, but with potential. This was not revenge. It was justice, tempered with compassion. For the first time, the power in this relationship was balanced. And in that balance, I realized something vital. This wasn't just about my tools, my studio, or even my success. It was about self-respect, about drawing the line and refusing to let anyone step over it again. I had transformed their assumptions into a lesson in accountability, and for once, they understood without me having to raise my voice or prove my worth with anger. I let them absorb it, knowing that the real victory wasn't in confrontation, it was in the shift, the promise of growth, and the unshakable knowledge that I controlled my world. Weeks passed, and the tension in my studio softened. Jake began leaving little notes of acknowledgement, texts about projects he was trying, sketches he wanted feedback on. Aaron started asking before touching anything, sometimes even lingering to watch me work, silently learning the dedication I had cultivated over years. They were changing slowly but genuinely. I often caught myself smiling when I saw them make small efforts. Not because I wanted recognition, but because I realized that setting boundaries had not only protected me, it had given them the chance to grow. Change, I understood now, was as much about forgiveness as it was about enforcement. One evening, I sat at my drafting table, tracing the edge of the old pencil Grandma had given me years ago. Its wood was worn, the letters faded, yet it felt like a lifeline. I remembered her voice. "Protect your dreams, Madison. They're yours and yours alone." I'd held on to that wisdom through sleepless nights, through rejection and doubt, through moments when my family didn't believe in me. Now, it felt like a circle completing itself, my strength, my independence, tied to that simple, unwavering truth. Looking around my studio, I saw not just art, but evidence of a journey. The nights I'd spent learning, the mistakes I'd turned into triumphs, and the quiet victories no one had seen. I had built a life that reflected every ounce of resilience, creativity, and courage I possessed. And for the first time, I felt a complete sense of peace. The world outside continued its chaos, but in that space, I was untouchable. I had drawn the lines, literally and figuratively, and they were respected. I had taken ownership not just of my tools, but of my life, my boundaries, and my self-worth. I placed the pencil down gently, letting a small smile curve my lips. For anyone who had doubted me, dismissed me, or overstepped their place, the message was clear. I was no longer invisible. I never would be again. And as the city lights shimmered through the rain-speckled windows, I whispered to myself, a quiet affirmation that carried more weight than any applause ever could. I create my world, I set the rules, and I will never be taken for granted again.